Hey everyone, Sam here, otherwise known as FPL Pricey, and in today's video I will be running through all of the key transfer tips ahead of FPL Gameweek 11. Welcome back everyone to another video on my channel, and today I'll be running through all of the key information you need to make your transfer moves ahead of Gameweek 11. If you enjoyed today's video, I'd massively appreciate it if you could leave a like and importantly hit subscribe. We're under 200 to go before 5k. I would love to hit that before we get to 2026. So if you could support me on that mission, I'd be really, really grateful. Let's start off by maybe one of the funniest or most predictable things in FPL that happened this weekend, which is, of course, after pretty much everyone went out and sold Joao Pedro, he went and got his goal against Spurs. And to be fair, what a performance it was. Over the last 6 game weeks before game week 10, he'd had 3 shots on goal in 6 game weeks. Against Spurs, he managed 5 shots on goal, all on target, I believe, with an XG of 1.86, which is way beyond any other match that he's put up XG data for this season. So his XG's risen to 0.35 per 90 across the season. It's balancing out a little bit, and all of the problems that had been coming in the last few game weeks seem to be maybe much less of an issue against Spurs than it was in the last few. He didn't look anywhere near as unfit as he had done. He was getting much better service in and around the box. Vicario made a good number of saves that I think on another day, Joao Pedro probably would have tucked away at least a couple of those chances. And there was one in particular ball across to Gittins that should have been a goal. I mean, Gittins absolutely skied it. That should have probably been an assist for Joao Pedro as well. So I think anyone who held on to him can feel possibly even a little bit hard done by that he didn't get more attacking returns in this game. Nonetheless, he came away with maximum bonus points and a goal in a 1-0 win. So 9 points from him. And looking ahead, the next 2 fixtures look pretty good on paper. Wolves capitulated yet again against Fulham, who are not a strong attack. So Wolves look like a real fixture to target at the moment. So at home, at Stamford Bridge, that looks like a great fixture for Joao Pedro and Enzo Fernandez as well, and any other Chelsea assets you might have. And then it's Burnley after that, who, again, are one of the weakest, if not, I think, the weakest team, statistically at least, in terms of defensive data so far this season. So I think if you've held on to him for this long, he's a keep. I think you hold on to him for a couple game weeks longer. And I know Minteh is very tempting, and the move last week did make a lot of sense for any of you who could make that move. And of course, Minteh matched him in game week 10. But Mateta's fixtures over the next 2, I think it's Brighton at home, then Wolves away. I don't think they're any better than Joao Pedro's. So I don't think it's an urgent move to be making if you haven't already made it. And yes, Mateta's great. I don't think you need to be switching back or anything like that. But I think if you've held on to Joao Pedro, or you've got Victor Gyökeres, for instance, who went off injured after the first half against Burnley. So if Gyökeres is a significant injury doubt going into game week 11, Joao Pedro might not be the weirdest transfer in the world. It will save you a bit of money. He's got 2 good fixtures to come, and he does look like he's up towards his full fitness again, which we haven't really seen in recent game weeks. And maybe Chelsea are finding better ways of providing him with better opportunities. The one thing to note, though, is it was a historically bad Spurs performance. So how much of it comes down to the fact that they were playing Spurs and they had a really bad day at the office, and how much of it was to do with Joao Pedro and Chelsea being very good? The thing that I would probably hold on to is the fact that, okay, Spurs were bad, but the next 2 fixtures are looking pretty good as well. Wolves and Burnley, 2 great fixtures, and then Leeds in game week 14 as well. I think you can hold on to him, and I don't think he's the craziest player to be buying, although given how frustrating he's been, I think a lot of us will probably not go back there too quickly. Right then, so I think we're all very happy with how our Arsenal defensive assets are performing so far, especially in recent game weeks. They are impenetrable at the back, but there's a lot more debate around which attackers, if any, you might need from Arsenal in your FPL sides. Saka's been a little bit frustrating for any of us who went there, myself included. Was unlucky yesterday, to be fair, given that he probably should have buried at least one of those 2 big chances that he had. Gyökeres did score, went off at halftime with a bit of an injury, so we'll have to wait and see on that. But again, promising signs, possibly just a little bit of a flat track bully though. But one player who has been very consistent is Declan Rice. We know he gets the minutes. We know he's not bad on DEFCON either. I think he's picked it up 3 times so far this season. I think he managed 21 defensive contributions against Burnley as well, in a fixture that you wouldn't really expect him to be picking up that many of them. And on top of that, he's also picked up 6 attacking returns in 10 game weeks. He's much cheaper than Saka, so I think it's 3.4, the difference between the two of them right now. And Rice is putting up, okay, not great data comparatively to Saka, but the output is certainly matching, obviously bettering Saka at the moment. And looking forward, I don't think there's that much between them, especially when you consider the fact that, okay, Saka picked up DEFCON once, but I wouldn't expect him to do that very often. Whereas Rice, I think it is a repeatable thing that we will see every now and then, maybe 3 in 10, 4 in 10 matches, where you will get the odd extra 2 points. He's very good on a bonus as well. Whenever he gets an attacking return, he does seem to get bonus points as well. And the final thing is, he's on set pieces, and his set piece delivery, especially from corners, has been phenomenal this season. Arsenal, obviously, we all know how focused they are on creating chances from set plays, but Declan Rice has turned into one of the best corner takers in world football, in my personal opinion. Saka is doing a very good job on the other side, but he is 3.4 million more expensive. So do you just go for the cheaper option? Do you just go for the 6.7 million nailed midfielder who's picking up some DEFCON, not bad underlying attacking data, and he's got those corners and, of course, the free kicks? We know he can score the odd belter from those as well. I do just wonder if it's worth saving the money. I've personally got Saka in my side right now, and I don't think it would be the craziest thing to suggest that saving the 3.4 million, downgrading him to Rice, and then maybe using that money elsewhere might be a better way of spending that extra 3.5 million. Because really, right now, you're not getting that value out of upgrading a Rice to a Saka. So I do just wonder if Rice is just going to chug along. He's going to tick along very nicely with 5 pointers here and there. Obviously, keeps plenty of clean sheets to get that extra 1 point, get the odd DEFCON, and he'll just tick along nicely with the odd set piece goal, maybe the odd open play goal as well. He won't run at 6 attacking returns every 10 game weeks across the season. It will regress a little bit from that. But even if he can manage maybe 3 in 10 or 4 in 10, I still think that's pretty good value for money at 6.7. So decent enough fixtures to come. Spurs didn't look great yesterday against Chelsea, so that's not a bad fixture. Sunderland's Brentford in there as well. I still think it's a pretty reasonable option to be considering Declan Rice over some of the more expensive Arsenal attackers. If you even want Arsenal attack, by the way, you might just want to go triple Arsenal defence, which honestly right now, given the way they're defending, I would have no problems with whatsoever. Okay, so not to open up a whole can of worms by talking about Mo Salah, just as we've all gotten rid of him and he's been a player that we might not need to worry about so much in FPL. But he has scored in back-to-back games in, okay, not terrible games at Brentford and Aston Villa, but they're not easy fixtures. And now he's down at 14.2 million. He has reduced in price a little bit. The ownership is low. I think he was around 10% effective ownership at my rank in the top million. So he's incredibly differential. And just look at the fixtures coming. So I don't think anyone in their right mind is going to be buying him ahead of Man City away. So that's another game week where we don't have to worry about him. Fair enough. But by the time we get to game week 12, possibly game week 13 as well, because Nottingham Forest under Sean Dyche might be a little bit more tricky to break down. They are some excellent, excellent fixtures for Liverpool up until the point in which he goes to AFCON. Now, for AFCON, he will probably be gone by game week 17. There's a chance that he might be gone by game week 16 if the Egyptian national team coach calls him up early to play in the friendlies, which I think would kick off the day after their game week 16 fixture. So there is a chance that he misses game week 16. That is something to monitor and to maybe consider when thinking about buying him, because the time in which we've got with him, if you do consider buying him, will be pretty short. So we need to be very confident, especially for a player that is this expensive, that he's going to be worth the transfers, not only in, but also out when he goes to AFCON. And yes, we'll get our 5 free transfers, but we can also roll those down the line. So we might not want to use them on getting rid of a load of African Cup of Nation players. So over to the debate on whether or not Salah is worth it. Right now, probably not. Man City away, I don't think we need to worry about. But in the last few game weeks, Salah's data has been ticking up. And I think what we saw against Liverpool was the most cohesive system for Liverpool that we've seen in a number of weeks, possibly even months now. And it's probably the most cohesive they've looked for the majority of the season. Salah didn't have great underlying data in that game in particular, but it did look like a system that was more structured to getting him into more central areas and getting shots on goal. The week before that, he put up good numbers against Brentford. And before that, in the last 2 game weeks running up to Brentford, also good data without the reward to show for it. Now, if he only ticks along with 1 attacking return a game, which, okay, he's still going well below that on the underlying data, it's probably still not good value for money. But all I'm saying is, if he scores against Man City, which isn't impossible, I think, or in my gut feeling is, there's going to be a little bit of a crowd rush towards Mo Salah if you can get there. So my advice would be is don't buy him now. Just keep an eye on him. You might think right now there's no chance on earth that I'm going to be paying 14.2 million for Mo Salah in a couple of game weeks' time. And that is absolutely fair enough. And I'm with you at the moment on that. I don't think he's worth it. However, I don't think it's going to take too much more to change our minds on Mo Salah. And I can see a little bit of a rush coming if we get to game week 12 or 13 and he just has continued to score goals or get assists in the next couple of game weeks. I think by the time we get to game week 13, for instance, West Ham away, it is going to be very tempting for a lot of managers to go there. So all I'd say is have transfers in your back pocket and maybe a rough plan in mind as to how you might be able to break up your team to get to Mo Salah in case of emergency. Because the worst thing that can happen to you by the time we get to game week 12, game week 13 is you've got 1 free transfer, no money in the bank, and absolutely no route to Mo Salah if he has continued to look much better in the next couple of game weeks. Again, I think it's unlikely that he'll score in the next 2 and we'll definitely want him by game week 13. But now that he's scored a couple in a row and the data's getting better, Liverpool look a little bit more cohesive, I don't think it's outlandish to suggest that he might become a factor again before we get to AFCON. So with that in mind, I would try to save free transfers or just have a outline plan in mind by the time we get to game week 13, let's say, on how you might get to Mo Salah in case of emergency. And that's all I mean. Don't plan like you're going to absolutely do it, but it's just nice to have that plan in place just in case. So another game week goes past and another very impressive performance from Yancuba Minteh and from Brighton generally as well. They're not struggling to score goals, especially at home. Now, this section could easily be about Danny Welbeck as well, who has also been equally impressive. 6 goals in the league, good minutes, much better than I think a lot of us were predicting this season, and maybe even an outside chance of an England call-up in the next week or 2, which just goes to show how impressive he's been, especially for someone who's now 34 years old and has only ever hit double digits in the Premier League once, and that was last season. So Welbeck should be in your consideration if you're looking for a cheaper striker, but I've chosen to talk about Yancuba Minteh at a cheaper price, 6 million on the dot and 4.3% owned, so he's still very differential, putting up good data yet again this season. There was a lot of excitement last season when he first joined Brighton as to what his underlying attacking data might be. It looked really impressive before he joined up with Brighton, and actually last season it was still pretty good. The only problem is he didn't really get the consistent minutes that you'd want from a player to feel safe in picking them throughout the FPL season. This year, though, that has changed. So the data's still looking pretty promising, especially for that price point. And he's now getting the minutes to back up the data. So moving forward, I would say that Minteh is a more reliable pick than Danny Welbeck. Welbeck's minutes have looked good right now, but he is 34 years old and he has broken down with injuries a lot more than Yancuba Minteh has across his career. Of course, he's much older, so that is much more likely to happen. But if you're looking for a cheap midfielder at 6 million, I think he makes a lot of sense, especially if you've got someone like a Reinders in your team still, and you've got the money to move up to Minteh. I think with the fixtures to come, it's a pretty safe bet. He's got 6 attacking returns himself this season. Yes, they're mainly skewed towards assists so far, but the underlying data would predict that actually he's been a little bit unfortunate not to get an even balance of goals with assists, considering his goal threat is actually slightly better than his assist threat. Brighton fans are absolutely loving him right now as well, by the way, which is also a nice little feather in the cap of an FPL pick. If you know the fans are enjoying them, who are the ones who are watching them 90 minutes week in, week out, then that really does show a lot. And even though I think it's absolutely fair to say that he was a little bit fortunate with one of those assists of the two that he picked up in game week 10, he also gave the pre-assist to one of the other goals, which was a fantastic little chip through the back line of the Leeds defence and basically just set up the goal. So I think he is an incredibly good value pick at 6 million. Do I think he's an essential player to be buying? Absolutely not. They've got decent fixtures in the next 4, but they're not so obviously targetable that you need to be jumping on Brighton right now. They've got a good attack, but not one of the very best in the league. They're putting up good data, but not the very best in the league either. So it's very much a situational pick. If you've got a spot in your side, like a Reinders, for instance, then he would make a lot of sense to go to. But I don't think he's a must buy, and I certainly wouldn't be ripping up my side to get there. It's just a convenient pick if you're in the market for a midfielder around this sort of price point. Now, it's important to note, by the time we get past this little run of fixtures, the 4 that I've got on screen, Brighton's run does get even better. They've got a lot of green on the ticker, and during the time in which the African Cup of Nations is going on, by the way, Minteh will not be going to the African Cup of Nations, so he'll play through that. Brighton do have some really good fixtures, especially at home, where they've been impressive in front of goal. So, longer term, I think he's a very sensible pick for a very good stretch of fixtures. I don't think you need to buy him right now, but he's also a sensible purchase if you've got a spot in your side in which you're looking for a cheap midfielder. Right then, so let's wrap up today by talking about one of the biggest disappointments in Game Week 10. That is Nick Voltemade. Now, a word of warning, I didn't watch this game live. I was out and about, so I've come back and watched a few of the highlights, or at least up to half time, because he only got 45 minutes on the pitch before getting hooked when they were 2-1 down and obviously chasing a lead against a West Ham side who historically have really struggled in the air from set pieces. You would think Nick Voltemade would be perfect for that kind of match, but as far as I can tell, and looking at the data as well, it looks like he just did not get into that game whatsoever. More worrying than that, because let's face it, any striker can have 45 minutes to forget. They might not get that involved in the game. Even Erling Haaland does that, and yet he still racks up a couple of goals in the second half more often than not. But with Nick Voltemade, despite having a really good start to life in the Premier League with Newcastle, I think he's looked really impressive, by the way. Eddie Howe was still willing to hook him off at half-time. Now, I haven't seen anything to suggest that there was an injury at time of recording, but I am recording this on the Sunday evening, so we might see something else come out that he was struggling with a little bit of a knock or an illness or something during the week that meant that maybe at halftime Eddie Howe was just like, you know what, it's not your day, let's change this up and get someone who is fully fit to replace you. Either way, what that tells me is that Voltemade is not completely nailed in for 90 minutes, regardless of game state. Even if they're chasing the game, he can be brought off early. He's not an essential player in their system, or at least Eddie Howe doesn't think he is. And with fixture congestion coming for Newcastle, obviously they're playing in Europe, are his minutes going to get managed anyway? Now, the other side of this is that Wissa probably isn't a million miles away from coming back either. So I don't think we'll see him before the international break, but he is out on grass. He is at least partly taking part in training. I don't think he's in contact training yet, but it probably won't be a million miles away from him getting minutes in the Premier League now. So maybe by game week 12, game week 13, Wiss is going to start eating into minutes in that centre forward role as well. And Voltemade's minutes are probably going to take a bit of a dive. Now, if I hadn't seen what had happened in the West Ham match, I would have said, don't even worry about it, because he's been getting 90 minutes. He's been looking fantastic. He's great in the air. And if anything, they're going to try and find a solution that incorporates both Voltemade and Wissa. But Eddie Howe has surprised me in this fixture a little bit. And I think we need to bake that into our thinking moving forwards. And unfortunately now at 7.5 million, there are other strikers I like. So even one game where he's brought off early, unless we hear something about it being illness specific or he picked up a bit of a knock in the first half, which we might still hear about. And I'll put a note in the comments if we get something after I've recorded just to flag that. But if we don't get that, and it is literally just a tactical substitution at halftime when they're chasing the game, that does not bode well for him. And I've got him in my team. And right now I'm looking for a route to Minteh. And I do just wonder if this is enough of a doubt on his minutes moving forwards. And let's face it, the next 4 fixtures aren't great as a block either. Maybe that's enough of a reason to look elsewhere past Nick Voltemade now, especially if you're looking at buying a striker. I would have that as a massive word of caution that Eddie Howe is willing to bring him off now. So as we wrap up today's video, I'd really appreciate your thoughts on the players I've talked about today. And of course, especially Nick Voltemade, if we do hear anything else, or if you've noticed something that I haven't, please do feel free to drop it in the comments below. And that would be very, very helpful to anyone watching this. And of course, if you've enjoyed it, as always, if you could leave a like and hit subscribe as we approach 5,000 subscribers, that would be incredibly appreciated. I'll see you next time as we run through my transfer plans ahead of Game Week 11.